So we've talked about making a journal entry. I think it's one of the very most important things we're going to do in all of our accounting is being able to make a journal entry. What if we just made like 10 entries right there, right? What if the boss came in and said, quickly, how much cash do we have? How much cash do we have? Could we immediately tell him how much cash we have right now? No. If he gave you 5 minutes, he gave you a calculator, could you figure it out? Yeah, you could add what came in, subtract what went out. That leads us to something we're going to need to do next in the accounting process, which is something called posting. And after we post, then we're going to prepare a trial balance. To understand posting, we need to know that we're going to be using another new book. Now, we're already using one book to record transactions in. What was that called? The General Journal. It was a chronological record of all of our transactions in date order, right? We listed a transaction, its debits, its credit, skip a line, the next transaction, its debit and its credit. This book we're talking about now is going to be called the General Ledger. And in the General Ledger, we have a separate page for every account. So we'd have a page for cash. We'd have a page for telephone expense. We'd have a page for accounts payable and so forth. The General Ledger really is nothing more than a little fancier version of the T account that we talked about last class. Remember the T account? We'll take a T. All right. That's really what the General Ledger is. At the top, we have the account title. This isn't on your handout per se, although if you flip a couple of pages, you'll see some little kind of shorter versions of it we're going to use in a minute. All right. And then we have the account number over here. We have a column for the date. We have a column for the item and PR. We'll talk about those. But then do you see the big T in the middle? You see the big T? Really, it's a T account then. We write the account title at the top. We have debits on the left, credits on the right. The only other part of that that's important, though, and probably the most important part, is the far right column where we have the balance. After each transaction, we're going to calculate the balance. After each transaction. So this is really like just kind of a fancy T account. But we will calculate what we call the running balance, meaning after each entry, what's the balance in that account right? That process of taking information from the journal, putting in the ledger is called posting. And that's what we're concerned about learning right now. How do we post? Let's suppose we have in the General Journal an entry that is a debit to cash. We will then go to the ledger, find the page that says cash. We are going to record the date of the entry. In the PR column, we are going to write the letter J and then the page number where it came from. So if it came from the General Journal page 6, we would put J6. I believe your book may simply put the 6 and not the J. I want you to put the J in front of it because somewhere down the line that's going to make something easier for you. We're going to put the amount in the debit column because it was a debit. Then we're going to calculate the balance and put it in the appropriate column. Then we go back to the journal and make ourselves a note to remind ourselves that we have now posted it. The way we do that is we go back and in the PR column of the journal, we go back to the PR column of that journal and we're going to write the account number where we posted it to. That way we know, yes, we have now posted that entry. Once I see an account number written in the PR column, I know I posted it. After we posted the debit, we come back and post the credit, just the same. We'll do an example of that in just a minute, but before we do, I need to talk about how to calculate that running balance in the account. After each entry, we want to calculate the balance. And here's the general rule. If you make an entry that's on the same side as what your balance is, you're going to add the two together. Same side, add. If the entry is on the opposite side of what your balance is, right now we're going to subtract. Same side, add, opposite side, subtract. So for example, what if I have a debit balance right now, and then I make a debit entry? Same side or opposite side? Same, so we're going to add. What if I have a debit balance and then I make a credit entry? Same side or opposite side? Opposite, so we will subtract. Good. What if I have a credit balance? Credit balance, make a credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Same, we're going to add. Finally, what if I have a credit balance and then I make a debit entry? Same side or opposite side? Opposite, and we're going to subtract. Okay? All right, I'll give you an example of one. All right, page 21 of the handout. Everybody with me? All right, now what I have given you are the transactions, and all we're going to do now is to calculate the running balance. First entry, January 1st is the date. J1 says this entry is coming from the General Journal, page 1. It's a $5,000 debit. Now, I had no balance at all to begin with. If I had no balance and then I make a $5,000 debit, what's my balance right now? A $5,000 debit. My next entry is a $3,200 credit. Debit balance credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. Add or subtract? Subtract. Your balance now is $1,800. That balance will be a debit balance because the $5,000 debit balance is bigger than the $3,200 credit entry. Whichever is bigger determines which side your balance is. Next one's an $1,100 credit. $1,800 debit balance, $1,100 credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. $1,800 debit, $1,100 credit balance. Okay, opposite side. Add or subtract? Subtract. We get $700. That new balance is a $700 debit. Why? Because the $1,800 debit's bigger than the $1,100 credit. Next entry is a debit. Debit balance, debit entry. Same side or opposite side? Same. Add or subtract? Add. My debit balance simply gets bigger. Okay? My debit balance gets bigger. I have a debit balance, and then I make a credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. We have $4,600 is the difference. We're going to subtract because it's on the opposite side. Will my new balance be a debit or a credit? Debit. Why? Because the $7,300 debit is bigger than the $2,700 credit. Good. Debit balance. Now we have a debit entry. Same side, opposite side? Same. Add or subtract? My debit balance gets bigger then. Debit balance, debit entry. Same side or opposite side? Same. Add or subtract? Add. My debit balance gets bigger. Right now, I want you to figure the balance in accounts payable. I'm going to wander the room for a minute. Notice, let me make sure you get off to the right start though. My first entry is what, a $5,000 credit? I have no balance to begin with. So what is my beginning balance in accounts payable? $5,000 credit, right? My next entry was the $800 debit. I had a credit balance and I make a debit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. So we're going to subtract. My balance is $4,200. It's still a credit. Why? Because the $5,000 credit's bigger than that $800 debit. My next entry then is going to be a $1,300 credit entry. I have a credit balance right now and I make a credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Same. So we're going to add. My credit balance gets bigger. My next entry is a $4,100 debit. Credit balance, debit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. Add or subtract? Subtract. I get $1,400. It still is a credit balance. Why? Because my $5,500 credit is bigger than my $4,100 debit. My next entry is a credit. Credit balance, credit entry. Same side or opposite? Same. Add or subtract? Add. My credit balance simply gets bigger then. Credit balance, credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Same. Add or subtract? Add. My credit balance gets bigger again. Finally, my last entry is a debit entry. I have a credit balance. I make a debit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. Add or subtract? Subtract. I get $4,000. It is a credit. Why? Because my credit balance was bigger than my debit entry. My entries in these accounts, I had some debits and I had some credits, didn't I? How about, look at accounts payable. Did my balance in accounts payable move from debit to credit to debit to credit? Did it move back around? My balance? No. What did it stay for accounts payable? A credit. Why is that? Well, accounts payable is what type of an account? It's a liability. What is the normal balance in a liability supposed to be? A credit. How about in cash? I had debit entries, I had credit entries. How about the balance in cash? Did it move from being a debit to a credit back and forth? No, it stayed being what? Debit. Why is that? Well, what type of an account is cash? It's an asset. The normal balance in an asset should always be a debit. Could cash ever have a credit balance? Well, yes. What did we end up with in cash? I forgot the number. $6,600 debit balance. What if I had had one more entry and it was a $7,000 credit? A $7,000 credit. The new balance would be what, $400? But now my balance would be a credit, not a debit. Would that be a good thing? No, that would indicate basically I wrote a check for more money than I have in the bank then. Okay? So it could flip over to being a credit. It will not in class. If you find yourself with an asset with a credit balance, it's guaranteed wrong. In the real world, could it happen? Well, yeah, it's called an overdrawn account, but it could happen, but it will not in class. So please notice, your account balance does not normally move from debit to credit, vice versa. The account may have debit and credit entries. If the account is an asset, an expense, or dividends, its balance must be a debit. Okay? If it's not, something's wrong. If the account type is going to be a revenue or a liability or capital, its account balance must be and always be a credit. If it's jumping around, something's wrong. Some students, when the entry changes sides, they change the balance side. That is not going to work, I promise you. All right, let's do an example to illustrate how we actually post. Now, if you have your pages where they're not stapled together, I would encourage you to take the page out that we're at right now, which is a journal. I would take it and put it like to the side on my desk, because we're going to need the next two pages at the same time. One page is the journal, the next page is the ledger. Now, instead of actually giving you a whole separate page for each ledger account, I squished them all into one page just to make this easier, okay? Do you see the first account on that ledger page is cash? The second is what? Accounts receivable. The third is office supplies. The fourth is capital stock. And the fifth is fees earned. How do we post a journal entry? Well, let's take the very first entry. It is a debit to cash. Now, notice before we start that I called this page 4 of my general journal. Do you see where I have the page 4 written there? Let's go to the ledger, find the page that says cash. It should be the first one on your list. Let's record the date, January 1st. We will leave the item column blank. The PR is going to say J4. This entry comes from a general journal, page 4. It was a debit. It was a $2,000 debit entry. I had no balance to begin with, so my balance right now after this first transaction would be how much? $2,000, and it is a debit. Now notice, I just posted that to account 111. Do you see that? We're going to go back to the journal now and write ourselves a note so we know that we posted it. Let's go back to the journal, and in the PR column right there beside cash, I want you to write a 111. That tells me now that I have posted that debit. Now we need to post the credit. Credit capital stock. Well, let's see. What is that? The next to last one on your next page, I believe, isn't it? Okay, so let's find capital stock. Record the date. Again, we'll leave the item column blank. J4, this entry is coming from the general journal, page 4. It is the credit for $2,000. I have no balance to begin with. What is my balance after this one entry then? 2,000 credit. Notice I posted that to account 311. Let's go back to the PR column in the journal. And beside the capital stock line, I'm going to write the 311, which is where I posted it to. We don't fill in these account numbers in the journal until we have posted each individual entry, because this helps us keep up with what we posted and what we haven't. Get students who think they're smarter than me, they might well be, okay? And they take everything in the journal and they fill in the account numbers as they do it. Well, what's the problem with that? When they go to post, they can't keep up with which ones they posted, which ones they haven't. So what does that mean? They post some of them twice, and then they forget to post some of them, and they end up with a great big mess. That's the whole purpose of waiting to fill that in. Next entry is the debit to office supplies. All right, again, from the general journal, page 4. Let's go to the ledger. The account that says office supplies, I believe, is the third one down. The third one down. All right, let's fill in the date. Nothing in the item column. PR is, again, J4 from the general journal, page 4. It is the $500 debit entry. Again, we had no balance to begin with, so what's my balance right now? 500. I posted that to account 116. Let's come back, and in the PR column, we're going to write the account number, the 116, where we posted it to. Credit cash, 500. Let's go to the ledger, find the page that says cash. I believe that's the first one listed. We're going to record the date. Now, notice if my month hasn't changed, I don't even have to write January again. Okay, I can just write the day. Save us a little bit of writing. J4, that entry was a $500 credit. I had a $2,000 debit balance. I made a $500 credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. Add or subtract? Subtract. We get $1,500. Is that balance going to be a debit or a credit? A debit. Why? Because the $2,000 debit was bigger than the $500 credit. I'm going to write it in the debit column then. That went to account 111. We're going to come back and in the PR column in the journal, we're going to write the 111 where we posted it to. All right, let's do another one. Debit cash for $80. Debit cash for $80. Let's go to the ledger, find the page that says cash. It should be the first one. All right, it's an $80 debit. Debit balance, debit entry, add or subtract. Add. My debit balance gets bigger. I just posted that to account 111. We're going to go back to the journal. In my PR column, I'm going to write the 111 where I posted it to. And now I know that I have posted that one entry.
What did we just do in that transaction? Did we sell office supplies?
Yeah, actually, we returned some supplies would be the only logical reason for doing that. You're exactly right. And I didn't put the explanations on y'all's, I believe, because I was trying to get as many entries as I could squished on that page. Good question, though. Good observation. All right, the next entry, credits office supplies. Credits office supplies. Well, let's see. That's our third account down, I think, on the ledger page. We had a debit balance. Now we make a credit entry. Debit balance, credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Opposite. Add or subtract? Subtract. My new balance is $420. It is a debit. Why? Because the $500 debit was bigger than the $80 credit. I just posted that to account 116. So we're going to go back to the journal and in the PR column write the 116 where we posted it to. Debit cash. Let's go to the ledger, find the page that says cash. It's the first one. Record the date. Again, these are all coming from the general journal, page 4. Debit balance and a debit entry. Same side or opposite side? Same. Add or subtract? Add. My debit balance gets bigger. My debit balance now is $18.80. And come back and fill in the 111 because that's where we posted that entry to. Again, the balance should not be jumping back and forth. If it is an asset, an expense, or dividends, the balance should always be a debit. If it is a liability, if it's revenue or capital, the balance should always be a credit. Credit capital stock, $300. Again, I think that's that's the fourth one down on your page there. Credit balance, credit entry. Same side or opposite side? Same. Add or subtract? Add. My credit balance then gets bigger. After I posted that, again, that went to account 311. We are going to go back to the PR column in the journal, record the 311 where I posted it to. Now, if the phone rings or something good comes on TV and I get distracted, I can look at your journal and see you have posted these entries. Anything below there which has nothing written in the PR column, have you posted those yet? No. That's the whole reason we wait to fill in those numbers until after we posted it. All right. Now, you need to finish that. You need to finish that posting exercise there. Let's go to our ledger then. And you can check and see if you ended up with the correct ending balance in those accounts. For example, in cash, you should end up with a debit balance of $2,930. What does the J4 tell me on those?
Journal entry.
Good. It came from the general journal, page 4. If you want to see the rest of that transaction, you go back to the general journal, page 4. Notice in cash, my balance has stayed a debit. The entries were some debits and some credits, but the balance always stayed a debit. Why? Because cash is an asset, and an asset ought to have a debit balance. So even though the entries may switch from being debits to credits and back and forth, the ending balance should always, the balance in that account should always be a debit. Accounts receivable ends up with a debit of $400. Office supplies, a debit of $620. Capital stock, a credit of $2,300. And fees earned, a credit of $1,650. There's a way to check and see if we got it right. If you look to the next page, you're going to see I gave you at the top of the page a place where you can write your ending debit balances for your 3 accounts and then your ending credit balances for those 2 accounts. So take a minute. I want you to fill in your ending debit balances, 3 of them, and your ending credit balances, the 2 of them. And remember that we have recorded every transaction such that debits and credits were equal. Then we posted every debit and we posted every credit. As a result, we should find that my ending debit balances add up to the same total as my ending credit balances add up. And you should see a total of what, $3,950 for my debits and $3,950 for my credits. So if you add up your ending, the accounts that end up with a debit balance, if you add up all those debit balances, and then the accounts that end up with a credit balance, add up their ending balances, you should find that the 2 totals equal. That's a good sign. It makes sense that would work because, again, every entry has been recorded so that debits equal credits. We posted each debit, we posted each credit. The ending balances then should also be a balance. Here's what your journal ought to look like. What does that 111 in red tell me? It tells me that, for example, in that first line, I took that $2,000 debit and I posted it to account 111, didn't I? How about the 311 on the second line? That tells me that I took that $2,000 credit and posted it to account 311. Okay. When do I fill in those red numbers? After I've posted an entry. I come back and I fill it in. Then I move to the next one, post it, come back and fill the number in. That is to help you keep up with what you posted and what you haven't. So if I saw that the first 4 were filled in and none after that, that would tell me what? I posted the first 4 entries. I haven't posted the rest. Right? That's to help you keep up with what you posted and what you haven't.